Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's wonderful. It'll be lovely if you all can just switch on your cameras. If your internet is really terrible, you can also switch it off. That's fine with me. We will start with a couple of round of introduction. I will introduce myself, and the way I want you to introduce yourself is your name and something that's interesting about you. And maybe you can add anything, like maybe you watch Hitler documentaries on Netflix, that'll be fine with me. But yeah, start with something quirky. I will start with mine. Hi, I'm Kaushiki. I'm a debate trainer. I teach kids. That's it. We will start with anyone else. If I don't recognize you, what you can also do is write your introduction and something quirky about you in the chat box as well. That'd be lovely. Anyone who would like to volunteer? And one more thing that's going to be there in the class throughout is if you want to talk, if you want to introduce yourself, if you want to do anything, you can just raise your hand and that'll be good. But yeah, somebody has to introduce themselves. Oh yeah, go on, babe.
Hello everyone, I am Gaurangi. I'm a teacher, so I hope I don't sound different.
Okay, your internet was really, yeah, I thought you were beatboxing, but yeah. Thank you. You can also write your introduction in the chat box. That'll be lovely. Anvesha.
Ma'am, just a minute.
Okay, I can. Okay.
Am I visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, my name is Anvesha Srivastav and I love Stephen King, his novel, his work. He's a great writer in general.
Yes, exactly.
That's all
I
I've
agree.
written. I was reading the book right now, so that's why. Uh, Thank you.
That's really interesting. Isa.
Hello, my name is Isa, and an interesting thing about me is I love to fight and read books.
Okay. Oh, that's rather violent, but yeah, great. Simra.
No, not physical fight, but a
Okay,
debative fight. I would like.
that's great. Simra.
Hello, everybody. I am Simra and I'm in 10th grade right now. And I love to read and write poetry.
That's interesting. Gaurav.
Thank you.
So good afternoon everybody. My name is Gaurav Shukla and one interesting thing about me is that I love reading content that's eccentric and slightly warped, and I also love to pummel the opponent in a argument.
Oh, I bet you just like read an Instagram caption about it. Great. Advaita.
Uh, Hi everyone, I am Advaita and I'm in ninth grade. And a thing about me is that I like reading a lot of fiction novels and such. I especially love horror novels. Like,
That's interesting.
thank you.
Aisha.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa and I'm more of a declamator than a debater.
Okay, interesting differentiation. Pragya.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pragya. I'm in grade 11th. I love to interact and connect with people.
Okay, I also saw your introduction in the chat box. Great. Anyone else? You can also write your introduction in the chat box. That'd be really lovely. Dania.
Hi, I'm Danya, and I love reading about time travel and space.
Okay, you can also write your recommendations in the chat box, and maybe like 60 other people can watch with you. Shrishti.
Thank you for the recognition. Greetings, everyone. This is Shrishti, and I one interesting thing about me is that I like drama, and that is probably why I'm here.
Okay. Oh, wait. Kanishka.
Hi everyone, I'm Kanishka. I like to skate, write poems, and I'm a psychology geek.
Okay, that's interesting. Kushi.
Hi everyone, my name is Kushi and I'm from 11th grade. I like psychology a lot and I've taken it as my optional and I'm very interested in like crimes and all and I hear a lot of podcasts about them.
Okay, that's interesting. If there's anyone else who would like to introduce themselves, that's fine. I'm gonna take introductions for the next 2 minutes, and then we will start with our session. Yeah, I like that number of people are writing their introductions in the chat box. Okay, great. There's so many people. Anshul?
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Anchal Mishra and I love reading people.
Okay, interesting. Kushi introduced herself. Manvi?
Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Manvi Sani. I am in 10th standard and I love to sing as well as discuss about political topics in general. And I do love to gain knowledge about science and technology.
Okay, that's interesting. Adya?
Hello, my name is Adya Groh. I'm a student of class 11th. Actually, I am an ambivert. So sometimes I am an introvert to the strangers and extrovert to people who I know very well. And basically, I'm very a different kind of person in as per my aspect. So I think I acknowledge things according to myself that what is happening in my society, and I'm very humanitarian type of people. That's what I am.
Okay, that's lovely. I'm going to pause here for like a second. So I just want to create like a LinkedIn connection kind of a circle. So after your introduction is done, what you can do is like you can choose other person who you want to introduce, like maybe them, something like that. So you build like a chain of connections. Please,
Yes, I
Adi,
would love
choose
to.
anyone. Adi, you can choose anyone who you want to introduce, or you can choose them to let them introduce themselves. Okay, Adi, you will have to choose somebody to introduce. Okay, never mind. Arnav. I can't hear you, Arnav. Am I audible? Oh, okay, okay. Great. Arnav, you can write your introduction in the chat box. Nabila.
Good evening, everyone. I am Nabila Rahman. And one thing I like, or one thing that sets me apart from others, would be singing. And I really wanted to try M1s and debates too. Thank you.
Okay, that's lovely. Nabila, you can choose anyone.
Okay, I would just pick random because I would like to pick Gorangi. I feel I've already introduced myself, but hello everyone, I'm Gayatri. I am a very bright expert, so I hope I don't sound rude, and I love writing poems and reading them.
Okay, you already introduced yourself, so that was great. Yeah, Goran, we choose somebody.
My name is Koushik.
Who did you choose, Goranvi?
Mannat Koushik. She's great.
Yep, Mannat, you were recognized.
Okay, hello everyone. I am Mannat. I'm a 10th grader and I love reading and watching movies and interacting with people.
Great, you need to choose someone.
I'll choose Extraini.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Akshani. I'm also a 10th grader, and I love analyzing the socio economic and political impact literature has on our society.
That's great. You have to choose someone.
I choose Satviki.
Hello everyone, I am Satviki and I study in ninth grade. And one interesting thing about me is that I have surface knowledge on various n number of topics. Thank you. And I choose Adya Grover. Thank you.
Actually, I have spoken Sadviki. I have spoken.
Okay, so then I choose Anchal Mishra. Has she spoken?
Yes, I have.
Okay, we have you. Okay, great. You can choose like anyone else, and then we will move on to our topic.
Alia Hussain.
Hello everyone, I'm Alia Hussain. I'm from class 9 and I like writing poems and I love participating in events.
Okay, interesting. I will now share my screen. And yes, thank you so much for the introduction. You can keep writing your introductions in the chat box as well. Um, Let me know if you see my screen. It'll be visible in like a while.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, great. Yes, so we will discuss two things today. First, how to excel in all the speaker roles, which looks like Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, Deputy Leader of Opposition, and both the whips, even reply speakers if you've been taught about. And then we will be discussing adjudication. Okay, adjudication is something called judging. There are people who judge and there are people who speak. Debating is a community in general, which means you will have to communicate with everyone regardless of who you are and on what spot are you speaking. If you're a debater, that's fine. You can interact with the judge. And if you're a judge, you have to interact with the speakers. So debating in an whole is a community that you have to like enlarge in, and it's just same as MUNs, but MUNs are just like very, very different from debating in general. Great. So adjudicators is a professional name for a judge. Why is judging important? I mean, I judge every day on a regular basis. You can also judge so many people around on a regular basis. Similarly, I think judging is vital because you tend to give constructive feedback to people, and while you are judging, you also get to learn that where am I lacking. So in a debate setting, there is no professional, let's say, requirement for becoming a judge. You can become a judge. So whenever somebody enters into a debating community, there is no differentiation. I think anybody can be a judge and anybody can be a speaker. People often choose. My friends are professional judges. They're also professional debaters. You can be both as well. Depends on how much time you are spending on each of the activities. With that being said, I'm not saying that adjudicators are people who have no experience. I mean, within a period of time, they also become experienced considering that they go to number of tournaments, etc., on a regular basis. Great. What are the benefits of adjudication? I think there are a couple of benefits of adjudication. I think within this tournament as well, some of you might adjudicate, some of you might speak. So that depends on your capability and how much of a dedication are you willing to give. I think adjudicators are people who are extremely patient, who listen to speakers who speak for 1.5 hours to 2 hours, because every debate like tends to be an hour and a half above. Adjudication has a couple of benefits. First, I think you just analyze where the debate is going and how the debate can improve. And you have a lot of power to determine what speakers can do and what speakers have the power to do. Second, I think you can give constructive feedbacks. Constructive criticism is a word which is very, very popular. This is the power of yours. You can take this constructive feedback and you can implement that in your speeches later when you try to switch from judging to speaking, or when you want to just give a professional feedback or feedback to a speaker who you have listened to speak. Third is you can make decisions very quickly. I mean, if you have been observing a debater for 10 plus tournaments, or if you're going to 10 plus tournaments being a judge, I think you become extremely considerate of the needs and wants of the people in general. And lastly, on collaboration, I think it's an extremely intellectual thing to probably engage in like complex understanding of the debate format. I'm pretty sure that you all must have learned about clash analysis, stakeholder analysis, about the format of Asian parliamentary debating. So adjudicators are people who are responsible for ensuring that the room that they are a part of is run very smoothly, which means if an adjudicator enters the room, everybody has to obey them. It's not like you have to be a dictator kind of a person and you have to obey them regardless. It's just that there is a natural or a newfound respect for people because they're extremely patient people who listen to debates, and they oftentimes try to give critical feedback and like a growth kind of perspective to the speakers in general. With that being said, both of the sports, I mean, speaking as an activity and adjudicating as an activity is a competitive sport, which means whenever you are in a tournament, people who are speaking, I think judges give them scores based on the scale which the tournament is following. But every time a judge gives you a feedback or judge delivers a verdict means which house wins or which side wins, I think all the speakers also have to give a judge score. And if the judge is not getting a good score consistently, they will not be able to perform very good in the tournament as well. This is true for both the sides. I mean, judges have to competitively do better. Same for speakers. You have to competitively do better, like the name is in that set. Great. With that being said, we'll move to the speaker roles and identification. What do every speakers do? And let's understand them in depth. But before that, let's do a quiz. I will ask, not exactly a quiz, but I will ask you what every speaker does. What is the Prime Minister's roles and responsibility? What is the responsibility of opposition? What is the responsibility of every other speaker? Let's start with Prime Minister. You can just like raise your hands and I will just ask you to answer it. What do you think a Prime Minister does? There's so many hands. Okay, let's start with Vidyansh.
A prime minister set up the base and portrays the main arguments of the motion the government is presenting.
Okay. Aisha?
The Prime Minister starts the debate by setting up the base, and he first explains what the topic is, like whatever the topic is, he explains it and defines it and gives arguments and gives some objectives and some characteristics of the given topic.
Yes, that's fair. Anyone else? Okay, there's so many hands. Kushi?
So, a prime minister basically is the first speaker who opens the debate, then he defines the motion, and then he identifies the burden, and then he means he can either set up one argument or two arguments. It depends on the prime minister, and then he basically lists the stakeholders, and that's all I remember.
Okay, Arti?
So the role of the Prime Minister, firstly, he's the first speaker. Secondly, he sets up the base for the debate and identifies the burden of the debate. Thirdly, he lists various arguments. And also in the arguments included, there are rebuttals, there are stakeholders, arguments, etc. So he basically presents the points which are further carried forward by the Deputy Prime Minister and the Whip Speaker.
Okay, Gaurav?
So according to me, the Prime Minister is the one who leads the proposition team or the government team, and it introduces and promulgates what's the team's overall case, and also tells what are the pursuits or the endeavors which government, wishes to carry on, and also what's the overall government stance. So like a opening remark or a proclamation.
Yes, absolutely. So you all agree that Prime Minister has three responsibilities, and this is something that we all know. First, they define the motion. They clearly define what the key terms of the motion look like. So let's say the motion is this house would ban zoos. A Prime Minister would likely define what zoos mean, what is banning, and he sets the parameters of the debate. This also looks like burden. What has this speaker got to fulfill? This also looks like, okay, if I answer this question, maybe I give a better speech. So you outline like a set of questions that you want to answer in order to make your structure look more refined. Second, I think it's very, very fair to say that your definitions should be ethical. You shouldn't like squirrel. Squirrel looks like that you're trying to limit the scope of the definition. Let's say if the motion is this house would shoot, and if the Prime Minister defines shooting as camera shooting, it's incorrect because it's not debating. There is no opposition to it. I mean, why would you not like shoot the camera? Sure, there's one argument which is consent, but there is a lot more definition to it rather than just limiting the scope of debate to something that you feel is extremely convenient. So it would mean that shooting looks like hurting somebody or hunting somebody. The second is setting up the case. This looks like that you are trying to outline what your team has come up with, like giving out argumentations, giving out like case splits. What is a case split? Case split is you are trying to split your speech into parts. This looks like definition first, then argument one, then argument two. Like the word in and of itself gives you a lot more clarity. Case split, splitting the case or splitting the argumentation, what each speaker will actually cover and how will you cover that. The third is presenting arguments. This looks like that you try to lay out the ground, you lay out the base. You ensure that every argument is well structured. This is something that we all really know, so I really don't want to delve into it more. But if you have any doubts on the basics of Prime Minister, you can genuinely ask it, and you can also put your questions in the chat box so that I can address it however it comes. Let's go to how the speakers can become good if they follow this structure. There are a couple of things. I think every speaker needs to be strategic. It's like a game. I think debating is more like a sport and you have to play it in extremely strategic ways. This looks like you try to, let's say, give your speaker time individually trying to respond to other speakers, or you try to spend a lot of time framing the debate. All of these words I will explain right now, but think of it as like a sport. Everything has to be strategic and not everything is about giving out arguments, because anybody in the world can give out arguments, but if your arguments are not strategic enough, I think you are lacking on that part as well, and that costs you the debate that might win you the debate. I think oftentimes very good debaters are not like good at giving arguments, they're good at strategically pinpointing the arguments. Great. Two things on strategy. The first is framework of the debate. Framework of the debate looks like this. I want you to imagine like a photo frame. A photo frame has these borders, like, so these borders are basically your framework. You always need to provide like a question of what you are trying to answer. Let me take a motion. This house would ban zoos. Everybody would start thinking of arguments. I think that's fair. But what you can do is ask yourself questions. Why will you ban zoos? And if you're able to answer the question, I think you've created your first argument. Second, if a second question can be, what is the benefit of banning zoos? And if you're able to answer that question, you can create your second argument out of it. Then the third argument can be about ethics and principles. You can just add on to it. So you have your three arguments just because you ask yourself three questions. So framing of the debate looks like the way you want to guide your debate. Like it's like a photo frame. Try to frame your debate, put pieces in perfection. Second is preemption. I think a lot of people don't really do that in Prime Minister, but in Prime Minister, you need to ensure that you are able to predict what your opposition is going to say. So in this motion, the opposition might say unemployment, or they might say, oh, zoos are a safe haven. Aarti, I'll come back to you because you're raising your hand consistently. Your opposition might say, oh, I think it's better to just not ban zoos because most of the animals in wildlife sanctuary are unsafe because there are so many predators outside and you might get hunted, etc. All of these things really prove that you can just predict your opponent and just try to rebut them so that you're not able to, let's say, stuck in this loop where they're consistently giving you arguments and you're not able to respond. So it's better to just like knife them earlier as opposed to, let's say, getting into an argument clash later on the debate. So Prime Minister can just predict the opposition and it would be one of the, like, a good strategy that you try to inculcate. Great. Aarti, now you can have your question if you have a question. I can't hear you. Can anyone hear Aarti? Okay. Aarti, what you can do is like write your question in the chat box and maybe I can address it. Great. There are a couple of things in which you can just like strategize, and this is something that you have to be extremely consistent with. The first is, I think oftentimes people call this, framing is also called characterization, or there's a slight difference between the both. I will just write the word in the chat box. Characterize framework. Characterization is more like defining something, and framing is creating a world building. So whenever you look at a motion, this house would ban zoos, I think you would start with framework, this looks like what is the world that we're currently living in. We live in a world where people are getting extremely obnoxious about animals. They kill animals on a regular basis, they consume animals, and so many animals are killed on a regular basis. You can like cite more PETA examples, things like that. And this is what you do as framework. You create like, or you visualize everything in front of the judges. Why is the world like that? Second is you start with the definition, or you can also do alternatively. You can start with a characterization, or then you can build on framework. That depends on you. That's absolutely on yourself. But oftentimes people just start with definition, so maybe you can do the definition part. But even if you want to add like a touch, you can just do framework as well. Make the judge imagine what your world looks like. Second is preemption. And there's a question about preemption in the chat box as well. Ma'am, in preempt opposition, can the president say my opponents might say? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how people say preemption. Great. Second is you start with preemptions, or you can just start with dumping matter. What is the meaning of dumping matter? What you all people say argument, I say dumping matter. It looks like the first speaker on both sides of the houses have to ensure that they actually dump matter. Give out matter as fast as possible. This looks like do not give matter in a way that it overwhelms people. Try to structure it as well. Do not give 100 points when you know you only have 3 points. So try to structure those 3 points. So heading of the argument, reasoning, example. That's your first claim. Second claim might be heading of the argument, reasoning, example. That's your second claim. Third argument or third claim might look like heading of the argument, reasoning, example. That's it. So you dumped matter. Now in the last like few minutes or so, you can just preempt your opposition, or just say, oh, this is what they might say. I really want to rebut them, so that it really like chickens them out. This looks like it really makes them think hard about what our next argument can be, as opposed to, let's say, running the same argument which you have already rebutted. So that's a good strategy. Is this part of the first speaker clear to everyone? You can do this. Okay, if there are doubts, I'm willing to take it. Yes, sure, Shri.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, I wanted to ask you regarding the first speaker. So, should this first speaker present only the first argument, or should they first highlight the 3 arguments and then go on analyzing the first argument?
Oh, I think this is like a very common myth in the debating world, and I think this should be like debunked as soon as possible. So oftentimes people say, okay, a first speaker can just do 1 argument, or they can highlight 3 arguments. I think that's not how it works. What you as a first speaker has to do is give out, so cover as many arguments as you can and reason them well. If you're able to, so if you highlight 3 arguments, I don't think so you are probably like reasoning them out. You just like say, these are my arguments, where is the reasoning? So you have to ensure that you choose as many arguments as you can, cover in those 7 minutes, and reason them out. If you're not able to give out like your third argument or your fourth argument, maybe your second speaker can do it as an extension. But the third argument highlighting is something that's very incomplete. A lot of people or a lot of judges don't really prefer it. But secondarily, if you don't only have the capacity to cover 1 argument with good reasons, and like 1 argument with 10 reasons, that's a good thing, as opposed to, let's say, covering or highlighting only 3 arguments.
Okay. So then the second speaker can carry forward the 2-3 arguments that are left.
Exactly. Gaurav, do you have a question?
Thank you, ma'am.
No problem. Okay. Great. Let's go to the next part. Let's look at an example, and this is an example that I copy pasted from one of the speeches. So you start with a definition. You can also start with a framework. You can start with a framework. You can then add definition. Depends on you. Even if you just want to give definition, that's fine. Or even if you want to involve like a framework in your characterization, that's absolutely fine. I will just write the definition of characterization and framing in the chat box so that people don't get confused. Characterize is defining. Framework is creating a world, creating a problem framing, or a world in which your debate happens. Yes, So this motion is, this house would ban animal testing. So this is a prime minister's speech. So definition looks like, what is animal testing? What is the meaning of ban? Is the definition reasonable or not? Or is it within the spirit of the motion? Then you start with case split. Case split is, I want to give a roadmap. A roadmap looks like this. So as the prime minister, I will lay out our claims like this. First, I will cover this. Second, I will cover this. Third, I will cover this. So the thing that you were talking about, providing the heading of the arguments, you can do it in your introduction. Like, I will cover this, and maybe reason it out in your body as well. Then you can start with your argument one, why the animal testing really is leading to animal cruelty. Second is availability of alternatives. This, ask yourself questions. What does the motion really require you to do, and how can you solve it? You can identify a problem, you can solve it, you can impact it. That's the way you can probably create a speech which is much more like compelling, as opposed to just stating out your arguments as you please. Great. The third is, you can just preempt your opposition. So this prime minister covered only two arguments with at least some reasoning. The slide was extremely short for me to actually write a really big speech, so I just like cut it out. In preemption, you can just say, we anticipate that my opposition will say this. I would like to rebut or mention that our claims are more important or more significant than what my opposition will actually bring. And then you conclude it. Conclusion might look like impacting. What is the significance of my arguments, and how have I achieved the solution to my problems? We will also do a couple of exercises to ensure that we are on the same pace, but let's look at a recap. A recap looks like this. If you want to structure your speech like this, if you have an alternative method in which you want to structure your speech, that's fine. Insofar as you have a lot of reasonings. I mean, a lot of people have hollow speeches. Hollow speeches look like, this is the motion, this is what my arguments are, this is what it led to. But oftentimes people don't really present or be coherent. Coherent looks like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is the question? What is your answer? What is your impact? So always ask yourself questions instead of just framing things out for the sake of it. There is a question, let me address it. Okay, this is a big question. Excuse me, my question is that if you predict that the opposition would say zoos are better, as in wildlife sanctuaries, there are predators in the sanctuary. So if I'm the PM, can I say that the opposition might say, but I disagree, it's a natural process. Preventing and breaking the connection between predator and prey will somewhere affect the food chain and the natural ecosystems. Is that how a preemptive rebuttal will look like? Yes, absolutely. You asked a question and answered it yourself, so that was good. Okay, yeah, Shreya.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask that in the animal testing motion that you just explained, can you just explain what the framework would look like in this motion, or how the world which we have to create would look like?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So here the world would look like, so my world can be a problem as well. My world can be a way in which I'm presenting the cruelties of the world. This would look like, I can just start by saying, during COVID-19, millions of rats were tested in a scientific lab, which led to the extinction of this species of rats. This has affected the food chain. But on our side of the house, we today discuss the cruelties of animal life and how we can preserve it by banning animal testing. We have alternatives. We want to do this, we want to do that, impact, whatever. You can now continue your speech. So you start with something that's compelling. That's also, this is also called just showing that your audience is interested into something, and giving a linear flow to your argument. Linear flow is a complex method of introducing claims, but I will discuss it maybe later in the class when I'm invited next time. But what you can do is just start with something that's compelling, that's a problem that you're trying to solve. And then you can start with defining what your case split looks like, how your arguments can lead to the solution of the problem, and then impacting. Does this help you understand your answer, Shreya?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Okay, yes, let's do a couple of recap here. So a recap would look like just defining something, case splitting, outlining the structure of the argument, or giving a roadmap to the audience, because oftentimes audience is confused in an Asian parliamentary debate. They don't know what the speakers are trying to entail and how can we really solve it. So maybe giving like an outline to the judges or maybe the adjudicators or the audience as well can really help you structure things better. Third, you can start with, so this entire speech or a motion also has a principle attached to it. This principle is ensuring that your safety, safety, or maybe like ensuring that animal rights is also a principle. So an ethical argument can be identifying a principle, because oftentimes principles are universal. You can just say ban human rights violation in Gaza or in Rafah, and this is what everybody agrees on. I mean, a lot of people like Trump administration don't really agree to. That's absolutely fine. I mean, that's their point, and just like whatever. But yes, a principle or outlining or identifying a principle really helps you to universalize your claims or make your case more compelling. If you say ban animal testing because animal rights are getting compromised, that's a very compelling argument, and maybe you can give so many reasons just to prove that animal rights are getting harmed on their side of the house. Second is then giving alternatives. Like, do you have alternatives? And this is something that a lot of people don't really do. If you disagree with something, do you have an alternative to solve it? If you don't have an alternative to solve that thing, it's bad, because you have to give some degree of solutions on your side, right? So always think of alternatives to something that you feel is disagreeable or you don't really agree with it. Third is preemption. Just give out rebuttals, or just think of what your opposition will bring in. Great. Let's move on to leader of opposition. Do we have any doubts as of now? Okay, I'll move ahead. Leader of opposition has to do 4 things. I think you can cover 3 things from what we have discussed from Prime Minister. One more thing is rebuttals. I think leader of opposition is a strategic position, not that I'm favoring that position, but leader of opposition has already listened to Prime Minister and they already know what they are coming with. So the first thing that have to do before doing anything is give out rebuttals, and try to spend less time on rebuttals. Like, don't really spend like half of your speech giving out rebuttals, and then you realize you also have to give your definitions as well. So try to time manage. This looks like, try to give a definition, try to accept, reject, or modify government's definition. Let's say your prime minister has defined the motion of animal testing as something else, which is very vague. You would like to reject it. So do a definitional challenge. But in my entire career of debating, I have only seen definitional challenge happen really, really less. So ensure that you're able to only target the definition which you think is not correct or which is not within the spirit of the motion. If you think that your definition that prime minister has given is fine, move on. Maybe give your case which is much more stronger. Second, clearly explain any changes which you feel are suitable to your side. Third, let's start with presenting your opposition case. Since you've already rebutted, you've targeted, you've toppled down their castle, you can just now work on defining your side, giving out a framework on your side, presenting your arguments, and proving that your side is better. You always have to do this. Always be comparative. Okay, I will write this word in the chat box, comparative. Comparative is comparison between the 2 words. Oftentimes people just say this is what I have to offer as a speaker, but no, you are a speaker who is strategic. So you always have to compare. My case is better than theirs because of so and so reasons. So you always have to be comparative at best, because debates are won not in vacuum, it is won in like comparison to someone. So it's the same analogy, relation of success. I will discuss relation of success now. Relation of success. Oftentimes people just like don't compare themselves to the most successful person. They do it in relation to somebody. So let's say I want to be successful than this person or this classmate of mine. This classmate is thinking maybe to be successful than that person. I want to be successful like more than my parents, etc. So people address things in relation to each other. Similarly, poverty. In middle class people just compare that they're poor from like, I don't know, Ambani or Adani, but Ambani and Adani might also be comparatively poorer than other like rich people who might be there in the world as well. So everything happens in a relation. So you always have to compare things in relation as well. My case is better than yours in these parameters. So be like a teacher here and try to track things down as you wish. Let's go to strategy. The strategy is the same as prime minister, but you have to adapt here. And adaptability is something that most of the speakers do really lack. And I want you to be adaptable at best. What is the significance of being adaptable? So let's say if you're trying to do the same mistake as your prime minister, you are lacking the same strategy. So you need to be really clever and cunning here. You need to ensure what are the things that they lack. And if they lack this thing, try to track it down. So let's say Prime Minister did not address these fallacies on their side of the house. Let me counter this by saying that these fallacies are extremely important and this can cost whatever Prime Minister is saying. So you need to address whatever insufficiency that they might have in their speech as well. So 3 things on strategy. The first is characterization. This looks like whatever your government is saying is flawed. Try to tell the judge how it is flawed. How can you fix that for them? Second, try to present in a clear and compelling, like an alternative narrative. This is true. Like for every right-wing alternative, right-wing, like a politically right-wing narrative, there is a politically left-wing narrative as well. So let's for every socialist, there is a capitalist. For every like a person who hates like Israel, there is a lot of people who love Israel. If there are people who like vouch for Trump, there are also people who vouch for Joe Biden, right? So try to like create a compelling alternate narrative and try to think it as an election campaigning as well. Why do you think your narrative should win? And why do you think you're extremely like powerful in that? Second, preempt. I think preemption is something that you probably can skip here, which means like because the Prime Minister has already preempted you. As a leader of opposition, you can either dismiss the preemption. You can say that whatever they have preempted is incorrect because our case still stands. And if you don't address their preemption, it might go unnoticed because most of the judges will be like, oh, they predicted this, but you still ran this case. Why are you still better? So oftentimes you need to ensure that you're able to notice the preemption or notice the prediction that they're doing on your side of the house and then tackle it proactively. Third is dumping matter. Same. Give out a breadth of counter arguments. Tell the people why you are coherent, why you are relevant to the motion. If the motion is about government, don't really talk about capitalist. I mean, sure, try to give out relevance to it. If the topic is about capitalist or maybe MNCs, try to talk about maybe monopoly. That's the more relevant thing, as opposed to talking about anything which is not really relevant to the motion. I want to pause here and ask if there are any doubts here. Okay, I can move ahead. Okay, there are doubts. Yes, Shashvi.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I wanted to ask you, in your previous slide, you had said that address the potential weaknesses in the opposition's case proactively. So what do you mean by that? Because we are opposition. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Yeah, it's government's case and not opposition's case. But yeah.
Okay.
And one more thing, like oftentimes speakers are extremely narcissistic people. So what you can just do is if you're able to identify weakness within your team, try to fix that as opposed to, let's say, pinpointing the weakness on their side. Because what if you have it yourself? So try to be extremely humble and humble like that. That's one of the meanings that I can derive from this.
Thank you.
Great. Is there a question? Ma'am, can you explain dumping matter again for leader of opposition? So dumping matter is putting down your arguments. What kind of matter do you have? Matter also looks like what arguments do I have? So dump it out. That's it. That's the literal meaning of that word. Any other questions? You can also write it in the chat box. I would be like addressing them all. Great. Tips for both the first speakers. I think 4 things you have to be extremely like cognizant about. The first is clarity and structure. Let's say if you're, so it's not about fancy words. I mean, this is the problem that I faced entire my debating journey. A lot of my debate mentors would just say, Kaushiki, you really need to just boil things down. I can't really say imperialism. I think that's also a fatal flaw of debating as well. People also expect like other people to explain like a really simple meaning such as imperialism, but that's fine. But oftentimes a lot of judges might come from different backgrounds, or a lot of audience that you're addressing comes from a absolutely different background. So you really need to ensure that you are palatable. Palatable looks like people who can adapt very easily. So ensure that your speech is clear. Even if you're talking like a very basic thing, try to make it compelling. You can add rhetorics here. I'm fine with that. Rhetorics are, okay, you're asking questions. You're just like trying to be a person who is enchanting the audience with saying something that is, very obvious. Like who knows if there's any poverty here. I mean, this is a very obvious thing. People obviously nod their heads down, but yes, you can just like do that regularly. Second, evidence and logic. Try to speak something which is reasonable and not out of the, let's say, lane. And this is something that I address in most of the speakers of your age. A lot of the people just solve everything in their 7-minute speeches. I mean, in a 7-minute speech, you can't really solve patriarchy. You can't really solve climate change. I mean, that is at best a really like hollow promise that you make it to your audience, and you give solutions which are like, oh, you can just like not drive cars. I mean, not driving cars will not lead to climate change being solved. So what you can really do is try to identify problems which are within your limits, and then try to think of a solution. Like, let's say the topic is about this house would ban zoos. You might think of a problem as, let's say, humiliation to animals, not thinking about animal cruelty. Or maybe you can just like tackle animal cruelty as well. Then your solution should also be proportionate to what your problem is. If your problem is so big, your solutions can't really be small. And if your solutions are so big, your problem can't really be small. So try to address and be proportional regarding that. Third is engagement. Always rebut, always respond to your opposition. Never go anything unnoticed. If your opposition is saying these things, even if you think that's foolish, try to counter it down. Fourth, be flexible. Try to adapt to the flow of the debate. Whatever person is saying, do not get extremely like flustered if somebody has like insulted your argument, because oftentimes debaters do that. So always be kind. I mean, that's something that I always give as an advice. But if, let's say, if there is somebody who's extremely dismissive, who's like violating your argumentation, etc., what you can just do is try to be adaptable on that. Not like you scream on them, but what you can do is tactically deal with their arguments, rebut them, identify evidence and lack of logic in their speech. Let's go to second speakers now. Is there any question on first speakers? I see no questions on first speakers. You can also write it in the chat box. I will also share the slides in the group as well, so that you can also refer it back. Great, second speakers. I think a lot of people just prefer second speakers. I don't really know why, because a lot of times debating is a sport, which means you have to value every team member, you have to value every speaker. This looks like that if you have your first speaker, if you have your second speaker, if you have the third speaker, if your third speaker is messing it up, this looks like that it's your equal responsibility to help them, to figure them out, or to just like ensure that they're able to articulate better. So every speaker in every team is as valuable as you possibly can imagine. Great. Let's go to second speakers. How many of you really like second speakers? I've seen like a overarching demand for second speakers. Okay. We can see like significant amount of people. Interesting. Why do you like second speakers? Oh, I will recognize people now. Okay. Gauri, can you tell me why do you like going as a second speaker? Or if you like the idea of second speaker?
Yeah, I actually like going for the second speaker because they keep all the major points and they bring the debate about one point. They give their points and answer the rebuts that the LO has already given, or the other like DPM has already given. So they answer those things and they keep their basic and important points and they bring the debate to a point.
That's good. But if you think strategically, I think whatever you are saying, I think the first speaker also does it. So what's the difference?
The first
Let's
speaker
take
actually even introduces and gives a base and everything. So they have to go on about with a very complicated structure of things that they have to keep in their speech. But the second speaker has to keep all the points in detail, explain the points, and I believe that I can do that much better than going on with what the first speaker would do or the other speakers.
it's great you identify a strength. Yes, Pragya.
So according to me, I like second speakers because as a second speaker, I will be able to analyze my first speaker's speech, and if she's lacking something, I'll be able to counter attack and I'll be able to cover up, and then I can also analyze leader of opposition, like their arguments, and then I can, of course, counter attack, and I can just do my best in the arguments because I will be having the whip just after me. So yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Great. Thank you so much. You can write why do you like second speakers in the chat box itself. I would love reading it. Great. Let's go to second speakers. I think I have like a couple of responsibilities that second speakers have to do. I think first, they have to impact a lot. Impact is proving the relevance of your arguments. I think, why is the argument like this? I mean, what is the significance? Because what will your opponent do? Opponent will always say that there is no significance to your argument. So oftentimes the second speakers have to reinforce that this is the relevance of my argument. This is what the impact that this argument is trying to provide. A very simple like visualization of what an impact is. If I'm trying to hit you, then the impact is you are hurt. That's it. That's what impact looks like. Second is you prioritize things. You have to prioritize impact. So if there is an impact out of animal cruelty, that's more important than an impact secondary impact. You need to prioritize impacts and show why certain arguments are more relevant than other arguments which your other speakers have been trying to say. So here you need to like clearly carry more weight on the decision making power that you are putting on. Third is you need to evaluate. You need to evaluate where you are. And on the second, I think oftentimes people have to like say this in your second speeches, a good team might win. I mean, if you're not winning in your second speech, I think you need to do a lot in whip as well. So oftentimes in like very, very good debates, people like try to stretch the debate to whips and they're weighing it out. It's a very, very close debate. But in a normal debate, everybody should have this mindset. Try to win at second speakers. And if you're winning at second speakers, I think that's a good job that you're doing. But that doesn't really predict what was the overall quality of the debate. Third is strategic use of impact. Again, strategy. Try to place your stakeholders like this. So let's say if your first speaker has covered the impact on multinational corporations, maybe your second speaker can maybe talk about the impact on teachers, maybe impact on employees working in multinational corporations, impact on HR people, like impact on managers, etc. So maybe you can bring more stakeholders and place it according to your needs and relevance. Somebody was raising their hand. I want to check if they have any doubt. Ananya, were you raising your hand?
No.
Okay, never mind. Great, let's go to extensions. And this is where most of your questions get answered. A lot of you say, let me just like highlight 3 points in my first speaker and my second speaker can do the fourth argument. That is what you call an extension. Extension is, I don't have to repeat what my first speaker is saying. I can possibly just develop a new argument from scratch and I can introduce it to the team. And that's like a way in which you're expanding your arguments. So oftentimes debating is also like a evolutionary snake. I will just write it in the chat box. Evolutionary snake. Never mind. Okay, evolutionary snake is the way in which your arguments get expanded. So no argument in the world is just complete. Like you can never complete an argument. You would always have things which you want to say. There are always like nooks and crannies that you really want to elaborate on. So it's better to just like say that your second speaker can extend on something. I want to extend on my first speaker on 3 arguments or maybe 4 arguments. I have a new argument. I can just introduce it like that. So oftentimes what is the benefit of extensions? 4 benefits. The first is you build on team's case. You like provide additional points. You bring in evidence. You also bring more analysis, and you can further like support your teams to an extent where they feel like, no, I think we've dumbed matter enough. Second, I think it helps you to maintain coherence. Like if you're continuously repeating 3 arguments from like the first minute to the 24th minute of your debating, I think debating also gets boring. So it's obviously like fair for you to bring like new arguments in your second speakers, but your third speakers can't bring new arguments. We'll discuss that when we come to whips. Third is depth. I think depth is the most crucial thing a lot of people ignore. Depth looks like, how far can my argument reach? So oftentimes people just say women are oppressed, hence patriarchy. But what is there in the middle? So oftentimes people have to like, this is where I like think of reading more. You can read more in order to provide more nuance to an argument. I'll take an example here. Let's say, oh yeah, just a second. Oh, never mind the chat. Okay. There's one debater who says because of Great Depression, I will say it like that. Because of Great Depression, there was crisis in America, which led to people not having jobs. That's one debater. Now there's another debater who's saying because of the Great Depression, there were several impacts. The first impact was people losing their jobs because they were not able to stabilize themselves in the stock market. Second, the prices of stock market suddenly fell. Thirdly, people lost their employment because of the devaluation of the product or devaluation of their stakes, etc., or whatever stocks you were holding. The fourth argument is the people who were most affected were people who were working under employees, like such as janitors, people who like act as maids, etc. I think these were extremely costed because they had no like livelihood or a survival mechanism. Which argument do you think is more like has depth, and which argument do you think is incomplete?
The second one.
With you. Yes, can anyone explain why the second argument is depth? Yes, go on, B.
Excuse me, could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, the question was so I gave you examples of two arguments. The first example was like really, it had no like basis. The second argument, however, had a lot of impact, like it had a lot of depth and nuance. I hope you listened to the arguments. I was just asking which argument do you think is more compelling, which argument has more depth and nuance. Yes, Pragya.
Yes, ma'am. According to me, of course, the second argument was the best because the second speaker was able to analyze whatever points he had to speak, and of course, he pointed out all uh, the impacts, and then he was able to specify which people were particularly affected, which really had an impact. And of course, his speech was longer and more explanatory.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, this is something that you always have to take care in your second speeches. Let's go to rebuttals. I think rebuttals are the most important in second speakers because it can break or make you. So I think like the way second speakers are more exposed to speeches. A second speaker knows what's happening in opponent, and a second speaker from opposition, this looks like yellow, already knows what's happening in the second speaker from whatever government. So you need to do four things in order to ensure that your rebuttals actually make sense. The first is you need to identify weaknesses and inconsistencies. So oftentimes people just listen to speeches. That's wrong. I think for a beginner level debater, you need to write whatever they're saying and you need to track it. Like you have to be extremely active here and not like a passive person who is listening to speeches and who's like vibing with the speech. So what you really need to do is identify inconsistencies in their speeches. Like nobody is a great debater. Even a great debater is trying to be a best debater. Things like that. So ensure that you're able to exploit their weakness or inconsistency. Second, of provide a counter argument. If you don't agree with their argument, provide a counter argument and prove why your counter argument is better than their argument. Strategic timing. I think the timing is must. As a second speaker, you can't really spend like your 7 minutes just rebutting. You also have to extend. You also have to provide like clarity and focus on your impacts. You also need to like elaborate more. So all of these things really need to come in your 7 minutes as opposed to just spending more time on rebuttals. Are there any doubts on rebuttal part? No. Okay. We will also do certain exercises so that we're able to like come up with certain things. But yes, my laptop is dying. I will just get back to you once I put my laptop on charger. Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's wonderful. I will just reshare my screen. Sorry for the interruption. Yeah, I will take doubts first, Manvi, then Pragya.
Yes, ma'am. I was just wondering that how are we supposed to keep a track of time? Like in the inter-school debates, we usually have a person who is appointed to ring a bell. Like we have to speak for 7 minutes, so the bell would ring at 6.5 minutes, so just to warn us. So are there something like this over here also?
Oh, so tracking is not like time. Tracking looks like what they're saying and what kind of an inconsistency and weakness that they have. So let's say if you're a leader of opposition, or let's say if your opponent is saying animal rights is not really important, this is something that you have to take a keynote on. So my opposition said that animal rights is not really important, but animals have a lot of value, and this is what my counter argument looks like. So it's not really time. I think we'll have people who will keep a track of what this person is saying and how this person is saying, but you need to keep a track of what to respond and how to respond. Does that answer?
Ma'am, actually, my question was like we are supposed to speak for 7 minutes. So how are we supposed to know that aren't exceeding the time limit and we aren't speaking for more than 7 minutes?
Oh yeah, so this is what you can do, like keep a stopwatch. Yeah, you can keep a stopwatch of yourself and keep a time what you are speaking and how you're speaking. Oftentimes there are people like who are there to just like ring a bell, things like that. There are people, but yes, it's always like mature to keep a stopwatch.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, wait, Pragya, and then the next person. I can't really see your name, but yes.
Yes, Miss. Miss, you have not completely told the second figure roles, but I still had a doubt.
Okay.
Like suppose let's say the motion is the house should ban zoos. So my speaker did not, did a good job at explaining why should we ban zoos. Like she didn't say animal rights. She said more.
Oh, can you repeat your question once again, Pragya? Wait, is there a voice that's cutting out? Okay, never mind. Yes, I can now hear you.
Sorry. Where I got lost. Let me just repeat the question.
Yes.
Let's just say the motion is the house should ban zoos. So instead of having a great start, this my speaker says that instead of saying about animal rights, she goes like, "Oh, it would be so nice if the society has a zoo," like something irrelevant. And the leader of opposition has pointed that out. So how will I be able to counter attack if it is possible also in that way?
Yeah, this is a good question. So what you can do here is maybe just like just sort of address that this has happened and provide a argument which was much more relevant and much more stronger. Like obviously a judge. So oftentimes there are things that people misspeak and judges discount that. It's fine. People might misspeak. People might make mistakes. But if insofar as that mistake is not conscious, I think that mistake will just be overlooked. But let's say if the mistake is conscious, what you can just do is address that, and maybe you can move on to a much more relevant argument and spend more time. Like, sure, my speaker said this, but this is a more important or a relevant argument. You can just say that without like hurting anybody's sentiment. Does that work?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Okay, yes, Anshul.
Ma'am, the previous person asked something about time, so I wanted to ask that our marks, if like, are our marks cut off if we speak for more than 7 minutes or less than 7 minutes, something like that?
So 7 minutes 15 seconds is the ideal time. 15 seconds is the grace period. I mean, you have to complete everything in 7 minutes 15 seconds. If you overdo, judges won't really write down anything, and you don't get negatively penalized or anything like that. But it's often like advisable for you to not piss the judge and just like speak for 8 minutes when that is not even required and you're not getting marked anyway. So it's advisable for you to just speak for 7 minutes or 7 minutes 15 seconds.
And what if we speak for a little less time?
That's
that
fine.
are we negatively penalized?
It depends on the content that you're speaking.
Okay.
Great. Let's go to reconstruction. So, debating is a sport. So, oftentimes, what your opponent might do is they might just deconstruct, or they might just like really say that your argument doesn't work because of their counter arguments, and it is strong. So, oftentimes, you have to rebuild and reconstruct. Rebuilding looks like prove the relevance of your existing impact. This is what my first speaker has said, and let me tell you with more reasoning why that argument is extremely relevant, and then you can continue on to reconstruction. This helps you to adapt to debate dynamics, like what is happening in the current scenario, why is your opponent's tactics like this, and maybe help them. It also helps you to evolve your arguments. Like, it doesn't mean that if your opponent has attacked your argument, it doesn't has any scope now. It can be rebuilt, it can be reconstructed, so you can obviously reconstruct and rebuild. Second, it helps you to address the weaknesses of your argument. Like, if your argument is really weak, let that be. You can identify gaps and maybe try to fix them in your second speech as well. Third, it helps you to enhance your persuasiveness, because oftentimes a lot of like judges really need you to speak. A lot of judges really need you to speak something that is on their mind, because judges are extremely like fast trackers. They know, like, can the speaker say this, can the speaker address this, all of these things. And if you are able to address and answer the question of the judge, I think that's better, because it helps you to enhance your persuasiveness. Look, this person said this and that person is saying something like that. Yeah, the last thing that I want to address, and then I can move on, is maintaining consistency. I think if you're able to like extend on something, and if you're able to elaborate on something, it helps you to maintain your consistency. This looks like, okay, this was the argument, let me elaborate on it, and let me give you more evidences and logical reasonings to prove that this argument has some relevance in the status quo. And yes, it helps you to improve your overall case strategy and case binding as well. And the whip has more material to speak on, and maybe more weighing on that, and helps you like prove that if this argument doesn't work, at least we have 3-4 other arguments that you can depend on. Yes, somebody had a doubt. Yep, no doubt. Okay, does anyone have a doubt on the second speakers? Because I will be fast paced here, because I'm like running really short on time, so I will do whipping. Okay, whips, can somebody tell me what do whips do? Yes, Anshul.
Ma'am, whip speakers are like, they cannot present any new arguments. So they are basically there to close the debate and provide counter arguments or rebuttals to the opposition side.
Yes, true. Go on.
And also they are there to weigh the arguments and say how their arguments were better and why they deserve. I think that's for replies, please, but that whips also do it.
Okay. Danya?
Yes, ma'am. Whips are also, they need to identify the important clashes, and they need to do clash by clash analysis.
Yes, absolutely. Shrishti?
Yes, ma'am. Whips, they rebut all the DPM, the DLO, and PM and the LO, and they provide a clash analysis, and they cannot present new arguments, and they weigh the like worst case, best case of the argument.
Yes. Shreya?
Ma'am, whip speakers can present no more arguments. They have to settle the debate in their team's favor, and they have to conclude the debate, like how they won. They have to tell how they won. They can rebut, and they can also provide more reasonings to the arguments which they have stated earlier.
Yes, exactly. The reason why I asked so many of you what the roles and responsibilities of whips are, because it's a very dynamic role. You have to adapt a lot. It's the most flexible and an adaptable speaker, which means a whip speaker has to weigh. You have to do clash analysis. This is something that you elaborately discussed in your classes as well. So I will not be repeating what a clash analysis is, but you need to identify the main contentions in which you will win. Contentions are basically clashes, and you need to be strategic here to pinpoint where you are winning and what is your strength, what is their weakness, what is my strength, what is my weakness, and why is my weakness less weaker than their weakness. Things like that. You need to do a lot more a job of a person who's sitting in a shop. You have to weigh a lot. Great. Whipping has to be done on a couple of scales. First, magnitude, which means you need to now weigh what is the scope of your benefits and compare it with the scope of benefits of theirs, which means if your scope of benefits are much more than the scope of benefits of theirs, I think you're winning on magnitude. Second, probability. Probability is, do you think whatever you are saying can be achieved? If you are saying let's solve patriarchy, have you given enough solutions to prove that your scenario is probable? So you need to give proposed solutions which are much more likely in the status quo. What is the status quo? Status quo is what's happening in the current world. If there is climate change in the current world, what are the possible ways or what are the probable solutions for me to, let's say, solve something? The first is maybe focusing more on renewable energy, more, let's say, budgeting. Thirdly, maybe focusing more on climate advocacy and climate rejuvenation. And all of these things really help you to create more probable solutions. The third is numeracy. Okay, probability and proportionality. I will just discuss proportionality because I might have mistaken here. Proportionality is a different metric. I might have just like jumbled it up with numeracy, but proportionality is the same as probability. So proportionality might look like if your solution is small and if your problem is big, your problem isn't solved at all. And if your solution is big and your problem is solved, it has overworked or you've overbottled something. So yes, proportionality is trying to solve something in a proportional outcome. If your problem is big, give a solution which is big. If your solution is small, try to give a problem which is small. Let's go to the next one. I'll cover everything and then I will open myself to questions because we will then be left with the last 5 minutes of the classes. Numeracy. Numeracy is numbers. Count the benefits that you have. If you think on numeracy, if you are able to save these many number of people and if you're able to have like these number of benefits, you win. So you need to compare the number of benefits, number of people you are saving on both sides of the houses. Principles. Oftentimes debates are not only about principles, so it is like an even if thing. Let's say if your debate is about principles, compare principles. Which principles are stronger? Is the principle on animal rights more stronger or is the principle on human rights more, like, let's say, important? And this is where whips do a commendable job. I think whips have to compare the most difficult things in the world as well. So of like, again, animal rights and human rights are both really important things. But how can you compare? This is how you probably compare. The comparison might look like animal rights are important in these scenarios because animals are more vulnerable than humans. Side opposition did not give a solution for why their principle will work, which is why our principle is more important. Again, everything is happening in a debate world. You don't have to compare every grand thing to the world that is happening. Again, like debaters are not solving real world problems anyway. Fourth, likelihood. Do you think it's the same as probability? Likelihood is, can you provide a realistic assessment of whether this thing will happen? If you are saying climate rejuvenation will happen, how will this happen? What will happen after this? So you need to give a lot more likelihood analysis. Can this thing be likely in this time? Last is on scale. Scale is breadth and scope of the impact. It is something that's similar to magnitude as well. A lot of weighing metrics are similar to each other. So you need to like really, you can also scale on scale we win. But what is the scale? Scale is like, obviously imagine a scale, and if this person is winning on like 12 centimeter, if you're winning on 14 centimeter, try to just compare the breadth of your benefits. Which benefit is reaching how many people and how is it impacting somebody? So you need to be very, very clear on scale as well. These are the weighing metrics. I've also given an example. You can also read it because I will be sharing the slides on the group as well. The motion is the simpler one. It says this house believes that. What is the ideal amount of solutions to be given in a debate? It depends on you, honestly. Like your debate can't just be about solutions. You also need to identify like a problem in order to weigh that solution. So again, like there is no fixed amount of solutions and I can't really predict that. It depends on where the debate is going, right? So if you have spent like 2 minutes, 3 minutes on solutions, that's fine. Like solutions can also be a part of argument. Depends on how you are placing it. Next is, ma'am, can you put some light on numeracy again? Numeracy is number. It's a numbers game. If they are winning on numbers, that's great. If you're winning on numbers, that's great. Number of people you are saving, number of benefits you're providing, number of cons on their sides, things like that. I had a doubt that if, for example, the opposition says something morally flawed, like animals should not have rights in an object, should we point that out, and how do we do it without insulting the opposing speaker? I have covered that already in the class, but it happens most of the times. What you can do is address it, then it's a fallacious point, and prove why your counter argument is relevant. In this case, let's say your opposition has just said something which is weird. You can just say that this argument doesn't work because every living being has a value in the world, and every value leads to some meaning. So if you're trying to curb some value, and if you're trying to eliminate some value or meaning in somebody's life, it means that you're trying to, let's say, limit the benefit or limit the agency of the person to exercise their rights, things like that. So you can just like add on to more counter arguments. This comes with reading, this comes with more exposure, things like that. Great. Let's go to an example. This house believes that governments should prioritize renewable energy over fossil fuels. So the burden on proposition is to defend that governments should prioritize renewable energy, and vice versa. On opposition, you focus more on fossil fuels. This is how I've added the weighing metric. On magnitude, this is what it looks like. On government team, if you emphasize on renewable energy sources, I think you're likely to reduce carbon emissions, you're mitigating climate change impacts. So magnitude, what is the scope of your benefits? It's large. It's helping like public health, things like that. On opposition, you can just like, if you transition to like renewable energy, it is costly. It doesn't help like people who are reliant on fossil fuels. So government doesn't prove that. So opposition can just like exploit that weakness. On probability, which solution is more probable? Numeracy, how many benefits do you have, what comparative costs look like, things like that. Principles, what side is able to say what, and which side is having a strong principle. Scale is, what is the scope, what is the scale of problem that you have, and how much of a scale are you mitigating. Yes, this is what I something wanted to practice, but since we have like 4 minutes left, I will let you do this as a homework. You can mail me your homework on my email ID. You can also like drop down your queries in the mail ID as well. Yes, I'm now opening the floor to questions. Yeah, do you have any questions on first speaker, second speaker, third speaker? I can also revise. Wait, let's also revise. Let's revise and take questions. Okay, so in this like question, it's I've given like 3 different motions, and you have to like create 3 different Ma'am, I couldn't copy the question. You could copy it when I share the slide. Okay, so okay, I think what I can do is, since it's my intellectual property, you can just mail me if you want the slide. Okay, never mind. I will share it on the great. So on the first question, first speaker has to do 3 things: characterize, preempt, dump matter. Characterization looks like defining, providing a framework. Second, preemption looks like predicting what your opponent has said it. Dumping matter looks like sharing arguments. What is the argument that you have on your side? Second speakers have to do this. They have to rebut, which means they have to respond directly, they have to provide impacts, they have to rebuild, they have to reconstruct a little bit, and they have to extend. They have to extend on whatever your first speaker has said. The whip speaker has to do weighing on all of these things. Magnitude, what is the scope of the impact? Second, probability, is your solution likely, is it probable? Third, proportionality, is your solution the same as your problem? Principles, which principles are more like compelling? Fifth, scale, I mean on breadth of arguments, which breadth is more deeper? Numeracy is what number are you saving? Impact is like the consequence or the significance of your argument. You can also drill it down and you can like extend on it. What responsibilities does a DPM hold towards stakeholders? You can analyze, you can extend on it. So let's say if the first speaker has identified stakeholder as society, the second speaker can tell me the significance of that stakeholder, or maybe identify another stakeholder. Great. Now, do we have any questions?
Ma'am.
Yes, Anshul. You can raise your hand and I will address them.
Ma'am, how, like, if I'm the whip speaker, how do I utilize my prep time?
Oh,
Like,
that's a
what
good
should I
question.
do?
Yeah, in your prep time, you can play the devil's advocate. Devil's advocate is somebody who just thinks from opposition side, and then you can weigh their case. If you weigh their case, it's very, very easier to weigh your case. That's the easier way I can share. I mean, this is like a like a question that I have to spend like another session on. But yeah, that's the best thing that I can say here. Any other questions do you have? Wait. Any other questions? Oh yeah, Goranvi.
Miss, do we have to submit a speech or should we characterize and submit points?
Can you speak it again because I couldn't hear you?
We should submit the point for the homework or we have to submit like a whole speech.
I couldn't understand. You have to type your doubt. Type your doubt and maybe I can address it. Anyone else, if you have any other questions, I will just address Goranvi's question and then, yeah. Oh, okay, Gauri.
I wanted to confirm, like in a normal debate, if you have the time, you like if you, they have given you enough time, or the topic is like pre-given to you before the debate. So do you have to submit all the key points and everything about what your debate will be written down? Because that's how it went about in our school debates normally.
Who do you submit it to? Like, because
To the
in
judge normally.
no, that isn't required.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask you, what is the difference between a whip speech and a reply speech?
Oh yeah, reply speakers can wave. So a reply speaker is a very shorter version. So they can't really do a lot of. A whip has to reply. They have to extend. They can also extend a little bit, but they don't have to introduce matter at all. They have to wave. But in a reply speaker in 4 minutes, you just have to. So a whip probably just responds to other people. A reply is not a reply. A reply speaker can never give a reply. It's a summary speech of what you've contributed in the debate, not a reply at all.
More of a summary, and then countering. It's like bringing everything to a close. However, which speaker continues analysis and everything.
Yeah, but a reply speaker never gives a reply. Like they don't reply to the other speaker. They just say that whatever I have done, it's it.
Also, they don't mention that
Yeah.
the opposition said this and
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Gauri. Do you have any other question?
Yes. The whip speaker normally is like the one analyzing the situation and like going on about and rebutting their points. But a reply speech would be where you have to like summarize the entire speech and then point out and weigh the points and tell them that why, sorry, tell the judges that why your speech or why your arguments are better than the others, right?
Yeah, sort of. Yep. Pragya.
Ma'am, could you like just give an example of such a motion that which is very hard to decide where to tilt on, like for both the parties, and could you like elaborate on that? Like some hard topic for the motion, in which case we cannot decide if it is should be yes for the motion or against the motion.
I don't think so. There's any motion which like has such a difficulty that you can't really identify what is happening in that debate. I think it depends on debating situation. So there's a lot of motions. This house opposes stock populism. So the difficulty of the motion depends on how much you know. So if you don't know about stock populism, that's a debate that you probably can't differentiate what's happening. But there is no motion which is so crazily phrased that you don't know what's happening on either sides, because people make it accessible because everybody wants to debate at the end of the day.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, I didn't know. Like, could you tell how much time will the prime minister be getting after the topic has been given? Is there any time given, like, or is it suddenly the topic is given and then suddenly prime minister has to give the speech, something like that,
So
or we be having some time to
30
prepare?
minutes for preparation and 7 minutes for speech. 30 minutes for preparation and 7
Okay,
minutes.
thank you, ma'am.
Gauri.
I want to confirm that in normal debates, like, do we get the access to internet?
No. So access. So there are two types of rounds. First is in Asian parliamentary there is no two type of round, so I will not discuss that format. But no, you don't have internet research allowed. Like if that is the case, everybody would have like a informative speech, right? But yeah, no internet speech.
I wanted to also ask about what are they normally given kind of topics for debates?
I have that on my slide, but it depends on difficulty. Oftentimes, the debate is this house believes that governments. It's like it's a broad thing. Like you have so many things. It's just like it comes from arenas such as politics, social movements, pop culture, television, media, uh, uh, environment. Economics, big technology, finance, feminism. There's so many topics. Like I can't possibly pin something out for you. Yes,
Because like a few topics that we had got earlier, like they were given, they were like, is the color red for love or for hate? These were the kind of topics given to us for
yeah,
some
these are also the
debates.
kind of topics that you might get, like love, romance, things like that. You
It
can
was
expect
based
topics
in
like that.
upon colors or like fruits, very general topics which you cannot normally find on internet about like would you associate the color red with either love or with hate?
Yes, you might see a lot of debate topics. Like every debate topic is unfoundable on internet. You can't possibly, like, even if you want to research, it becomes very difficult for you to do so, because it's very difficult to pinpoint any, like, you can't get one answer on internet at all. So yes, you can find abstract topics, you can find very specific topics, you can find very easy topics such as this house believes that government should prioritize renewable energy over fossil fuels. And yeah, it generally like depends on what who is the person setting the motion for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Anshul and then Pragya.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask that like the competition which is going to head, like you said, we do not have access to internet. So, like, how will we like for the 30 minutes that are for the prep time? Like, we will be in a meet or something. Like, how will we like utilize our prep time?
So I really don't have the answer for this, because I'm just a trainer. I'm not somebody that's organizing oratrix. So what you can do is maybe ask somebody who's organizing this.
Okay.
Yes, Manvi.
Ma'am,
Okay, you don't have a question. Do you have a question, Manvi?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, supposing like I am the prime minister and I am not very well aware of the topic that is given. So how am I supposed to cover it up during the characterization of the topic and everything, if I am not
Also,
very well aware of that?
so you have a team, everybody like in the team can help you, but secondarily comes with practice. I mean, oftentimes a lot of people don't really know the topic, but they do like, it's just like a topic. Wouldn't that be difficult that you don't really understand anything? Like whatever you understand, you build on that, but it's like a game which is evolving. So you make mistakes, you just don't make good speeches, you make good speeches later. So it generally depends on the kind of exposure that you have.
Okay, thank you.
Pragya.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, in that case, it was one of the examples were given that let's say the house is supporting the women empowerment, and one of its members have been reported sexualizing women. One of the examples were given. So, Miss, could you please tell how are we supposed to defend it?
I'm so sorry, can you repeat it?
In the kit, it was given that an example was the house supports women empowerment, and one of the members was seen reported sexualizing women, and how are we supposed to defend that?
One of the members was seen sexualizing somebody.
Women, yeah.
Okay,
The
was seen.
yeah.
They said something in their speech.
Yeah, some like one example was given, so I don't know how to counter attack that.
Oh yeah, you can just like just dismiss it, or you can just like address it. What you can just, I don't think so it's a debate winning thing to say. What you can just do is this is something that happens on a regular basis. You can't possibly do anything about it. So what you can just see is this something happens on both sides of the houses. What is something more vital is you address the solutions to how this can be solved, as opposed to delving more into a problem. If their side has addressed more solutions, it's better, because they now get a way out of this. But if they've just stated the problem, they haven't solved it. What you can do is solve them for it, so that the judges give you more points on solvability or probability.
Okay, Miss, thank you.
Great. Yes, thank you so much for actually coming in the session. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had fun as well. Bye bye.
Yes, Miss, you really made the session interactive. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
It was a really good
Thank you, ma'am.
session.
Thank you.